Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to give people about another minute to get on. In the meantime, please download the resources on the resource widget. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight on our webinar on building mathematical content knowledge. Tonight, I'm Nicole Bravo. I'm the project manager from the professional learning team, and our guests tonight are Jenny Beltramini, who's a math specialist with SAP, and Kristen Gray, who's the director of K-5 curriculum and professional learning at Illustrative Mathematics. I take a minute to describe who we are. So if you haven't joined us before, we are a Core Advocate Network, and Core Advocates believe in the power of standards to prepare all students for their college or careers. They are eager to support and collaborate with colleagues, their communities, and their schools, their districts, their states to understand and translate the shifts. And they also have the tools and knowledge to advocate for high quality instruction and instructional resources and professional learning in their communities. If you want to learn more about us, please feel free to contact Jenny at jbeltramini@studentsachieve.net. You can also complete our survey and join our network at achievethecore.org/CA signup. And if you want to take a look at our tools, our resources for teachers, everything is free on our website at achievethecore.org. So we want to know, how many Core Advocate webinars have you attended? Is this your first one? Have you attended, who knows, maybe like 16 plus? So please take a few seconds to answer the survey. So it looks like over 50% of you, this is your first webinar. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope that you will continue to join us in future webinars. Our next category, 1 to 5, thanks for returning. We have some 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and we have 1%. So maybe there's a few people out there who are rock stars and have attended 16 plus of our webinars. Thank you so much. Please tweet with us today. You can use our hashtag #CoreAdvocates, the hashtag LearnWithIM, and then there are some Twitter handles for Jenny, Kristen, and for SAP. You'll see the Twitter logo on the bottom. If you click there, you will see the feed, and you will be able to see your tweets on there. On the next, we're going to show a small video of, short video, sorry, of how to use this platform. So please stay tuned.
Welcome to the platform we'll be using for today's professional learning experience. A few quick tips to help you get started. On the left-hand side, you'll see this tells you about all of the widgets or capabilities that are available for today's session. If you click any of those widget icons, you can see that that widget will appear and disappear on your screen. You can also resize by clicking on any of the boxes or widgets to make them bigger or smaller, and even move them around your screen. The next widget is the media player. This will be used if there's any video or audio content for today's session. The Q&A widget is for you to ask questions directly of the presenters. You might ask a question about the content that you're hearing today or about something you're having trouble with on the platform. The next widget is the resource list. The resource tab has any resources that the presenter may be referencing during today's session. If you click on those, your screen will automatically show the resource that is needed. and you'll tab back over in your internet browser to get back to the platform. The group chat is where you can talk directly with other participants on the line today. Type your message in, click submit, and everyone who's on the line will be able to see what you're saying. Last but not least is the Twitter widget. This is where you can see tweets coming in from our handle, Achieve the Core, and watch other tweets that are appearing with the hashtag Achieve the Core from today's session. Take a moment to fix the widgets on your desktop so that they fit your own needs. You can make them bigger and smaller, move them around, and you're ready to go for today's session.
So now I'll turn it over to Jenny to get us started on the content.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I am Jenny Beltramini. I'm a math specialist on the professional learning team at Student Achievement Partners, and I am super excited to be here this evening and to spend some time with all of you core advocates digging into math content knowledge. We're going to start with a poll tonight, and actually you can check all that apply. We'd love to get a sense of who's on the webinar tonight, so if you could answer which of the following best describes your role by clicking in any of the boxes that are applicable. Great, so it looks like most of the people with us are teachers tonight, more heavy on the K-5 side than the 6-12 side. We also have a good number of instructional coaches and a few other school-based and district-based leaders. So it's great to have all of you this evening. We'd love for you to think about tonight as we get into the webinar content, how it applies to you and how you might take it back to your local context based on what your role is and what you do in your school district or otherwise. So the goals of our webinar tonight are to help everybody understand the importance of math knowledge for teaching and why it matters for teachers to have time and space to dig into math content knowledge. We're going to practice a process with you tonight to deepen math content knowledge, and we hope that you'll be able to use that process in your own settings and with content knowledge that is specific to what you teach or what you work with. We're going to actually use the 3-5 fraction progression, or actually part of it, to help us understand that process. But we will also think about how to select other important topics that are important for deepening teacher understanding. So we're going to start. Some of you, I noticed that you've already been introducing yourselves and commenting in the group chat widget, but we'd love for you to use the group chat widget right now to type your response to the following prompt. So what math topic comes to mind when you think about complex math concepts that require deep teacher knowledge to teach? So if you want to take a minute and type a math topic or two into the group chat, that would be great. Great, feel free to keep typing. I saw fractions pop up quite a lot, operations with fractions. I saw quite a lot of people wrote functions as a topic. I saw ratios and proportional relationships. I saw some inequalities, some more high school level content, equations, geometry. So good. It's good to think about what topics in math are worth time and energy in terms of like diving deeply into them in order to be really prepared to teach them. And so we are going to go on, but we'll continue thinking about this as we go through the webinar. So we're going to start off tonight by really diving into why does mathematical content knowledge matter. And I pulled this quote because it resonated with me as a adult and a person that went through the school system myself a long time ago, actually. But what this says is the quality of mathematics teaching depends on teachers' knowledge of the content. That should not be a surprise. And equally unsurprising is that many U.S. teachers lack sound mathematical understanding and skill. This is to be expected because most teachers, like most other adults in this country, are graduates of the very system that we seek to improve. And so this is a fact that I have found frustrating at times in my own teaching experience, in that I'm wanting to teach students things that I didn't learn myself. Or teach them in new, more deep, more conceptual ways than what I was taught. And so thinking about how important it is that we as teachers acknowledge that and that we find a way to get past that and to really leverage our own learning. We need to be learners just like our students in order to prepare to teach in a deeper, more conceptual way than we maybe learned ourselves. So that quote was from Deborah Ball, and most of you are probably familiar with Deborah Ball, but she's done a lot of work on the idea of what type of knowledge is needed for teaching, and it's different than just general knowledge that any adult needs. So in the webinar tonight, we're going to focus mostly on subject matter knowledge. So a lot of times teachers, when they go to teacher prep programs, you go to school to become a teacher, even a lot of professional development teachers get after they become teachers, is centered around specifics to teaching. Like, what do you need to know about your students? What do you need to know about the content for teaching it? What do you need to know about curriculum? But it's important that we back up and think about also just general subject matter knowledge. And there's a couple of types. So common content knowledge is just what general adults have, maybe well-educated adults around a subject. But specialized content knowledge is specific for teaching, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more deeply. So again, common content knowledge required in order to solve tasks that maybe are given to students, the knowledge held by a well-educated adult. And what Deborah Ball said, or her research is around, is that that's not enough for teaching students. In order to teach students, teachers need to have specialized content knowledge. And so that's unique mathematical understanding and reasoning that's specific to teaching. So math knowledge that's needed for teaching in order to be able to maybe interpret student errors, evaluate alternate algorithms and strategies, select appropriate representations, maybe determine the validity of a mathematical argument, and many other tasks that teachers do on a daily basis that math teachers do. Teachers need math knowledge independent of knowledge of students or knowledge of teaching. And it's just mathematical knowledge that's specific to be able to do the tasks of teaching. And so this final quote, I think, is so interesting that, we spend a lot of time talking about standards and curriculum, but what Deborah Ball said is strong standards and quality curriculum are important, but no curriculum teaches itself. The standards don't operate independently of professional use of them, and to be able to implement the standards and curriculum effectively, school systems depend on the work of skilled teachers who understand the subject matter. So thinking about, again, in a lot of professional learning and professional development that teachers receive, it's around teaching, it's around pedagogy, it's around, management strategies and different types of teaching, maybe around assessment, but rarely do teachers have this time and space to dig deeply just into the mathematics, but we think it's important. So we're going to do one more quick poll. You can actually select all that applies again. But have you ever had to dig into a math topic in order to prepare to teach it? And how did you, or would you, deepen your own content knowledge? So go ahead and select all boxes that apply, and we'll take a look at the results in just a minute. Oh, great. So it looks like we had an equal amount of responses to all of them. And because it says, 78, 76, 72, 72%, it seems like many of you selected more than one. But some of us do the math ourselves. Some of us collaborate with a colleague. People have said that they've watched videos on resources that are available online, like YouTube or Khan Academy or LearnZillion. And it looks like a lot of people also read about the mathematics either in the textbook or progression documents or other places. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these in the process that Kristen's going to share with us in just a minute. So we're going to dig into now how can we deepen our mathematical content knowledge. We know it's important. So how can we do it? And I'm going to pass it off to my friend and colleague, Kristen Gray, to introduce herself and to take over the next section of the webinar tonight.
Hi, thank you, Jenny. I'm Kristen Gray. I'm the Director of K-5 Curriculum, Professional Learning at Illustrative Mathematics. So excited to be here this evening. I'm going to start us off by doing some math, and I was really excited to see fractions popping up a lot in that opening question, because that's where we're going to focus a lot of our time tonight. So I just want you to think about part A in this task. What fraction of the rectangle below is shaded? And then if you could, in the group chat widget, share how you would explain why or why not Laura is correct for part B. So I'll give you some time. If you have some scratch paper, you can try it out there. If you just want to think about it and put your response in the group chat, that would be great. And I want us in particular to think about how we could explain using the picture. So I see a lot of the simplified and equivalence, and I'm just wondering what it might look like if we were to use the picture to explain why. Great. I'd love to see so many of the moving the blue around. I think that's a really interesting idea of thinking about. We can move them and then we could see those 4 rows. So we could say 1/4 with 4 being the 4 rows that we see. And then we also have some explanations of each part being 1/12. So then if she has 3 of those shaded, she would have 3/12. And then 3/12 we know is equivalent to 1/4. So if you are still responding, I really love the responses and the variances in them. So if you're able to keep up with that chat, which is quite fast, it's nice to see all the different responses, because I imagine in a classroom we would hear all of these different responses. This is a 4th grade task from the Illustrative Mathematics website. It is in your resources widget if you do want to reference it after. And we're going back to Jenny's work around teacher learning. This is the thing that we always recommend starting with, is just do the math for yourself as a learner. So if we were in a PLC or working by ourselves, we would just do the math of the task and think about all the different ways that we could answer that particular problem. So thinking about the math that you just did and some of the responses we read in the group chat, I want you to think about these 4 questions. What ideas would students need to understand to be successful here? What math was the task addressing specifically? And what is it building on and what is it building towards? So you could just jot your thoughts to any of those 4 questions, ones that jumped out at you. And then we're going to just share a few of those and then move on of how we would move forward with this process after we do the math. So I'll give you a second just to type in the group chat answers to those questions about the math in this task, what it's building on, what it's building toward.
Kristen, I'll just call out, I know the group chat moves really fast, so as I read some, I might call some out, but I saw that somebody said the basic understanding of what a fraction is really important. And another one is around partitioning, so being able to partition and understanding partitioning of a whole.
Yes, and I see those 12 parts, and then thinking about how the standards, talk about the parts in terms of the size of the piece. So thinking about that, each piece of that, not only seeing that it's partitioned into 12 parts that are equal, but knowing that the size of each of those pieces is 1/12, is one of those key ideas that are in the 3rd grade standards that I saw fly past something about the parts and pieces. And then a lot of equivalence in there, and I think that was obvious in a lot of our responses to it with the 1/4 equal to 3/12 as people were going.
I also saw somebody say it's building towards proportional thinking, and also somebody saying it's building towards operations with fractions, maybe specifically addition and subtraction.
Great. And so the interesting part of doing math together and then reflecting on these questions, it just is an interesting perspective on how people think about the mathematics, and it's based on their own prior experiences with mathematics, what they've seen their students probably do in the classroom. And so it's really important when we're thinking about teacher learning and we're working in groups with one another that we do ground our understandings in the standards, because that gives us a place to talk about what students have done in prior years and what they're doing in future years. And it kind of takes the variance out of what we think will happen versus what the standards are saying should happen in a particular progression. So we always recommend that when after you do the math and you share your different ideas around what the math is building on and what the math is building toward, that you look at the coherence map on Achieve the Core. And this was a task that is tagged in the equivalence progression. So you can see if we look this up, this particular task is for an FA1, and you can see how it links back to the work in 3 NFA3 and then forward to 5 NFA1. So it's really a nice way to think about what students might do and what we know about the math, and then look at the standards in the coherence map and think about the progression students are taking in terms of the standards. And then after using the coherence map, which is more of a glimpse of the standard with a related task, it's really nice to go into the progression documents, which are also linked in your resources widget. These are more lengthy than the coherence map. So the coherence map gives you a nice picture of the standard and related tasks. So you can see task building as well. And then the progressions are nice to go a little bit deeper in the content. So we are going to take a look at, although we would love to sit and do this with everyone all evening and read them all, they are quite lengthy. So what we did is we clipped pieces of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade progression documents that relate to this task and other tasks that we're going to be looking at. So in just a minute, I'm going to put up 3 excerpts from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade under the equivalence progression. And we're going to revisit these 2 questions, but I wanted to give you a bit of a lens for your reading. So as you read them, I want you to think about what big ideas stood out to you in each grade level section, and where do you see similarities or connections between the grade levels. So I'm just going to leave this here. So we're just going to pull up one at a time. This is from grade 3, so just take a minute to read this. take a minute to read grade 4 in the same progression. And now grade 5. Now we're going to revisit the questions that were posed before. And I'd love you just to share in the group chat what big ideas stood out to you and where did you see similarities or connections between the grade levels? So what jumped out at you as big ideas and similarities and connections?
Griffin P. made then noticing that the language is increasingly algebraic, which I thought was an interesting idea.
I do, definitely, which I think kind of makes sense in terms of the work, right, in terms of being concrete as we're starting, and then students do more generalizing to then use what they know.
And some people have mentioned the base of starting with number lines and how that can be used to understand equivalence and then building on from there. So the idea kind of concrete to more abstract.
Yeah, and I saw somewhere in there the fraction strips to number lines. I know we're thinking a lot about that in curriculum and just thinking about how those representations support student learning. Great.
And also several people have mentioned, sorry, one more thing, Kristen. Several people have mentioned that the idea that how they saw the foundation in third grade being applied in other ways moving up. So how, there's a foundation of the concept of equivalence, but then by 5th grade, they're using equivalence to do operations.
Yes, exactly. And I saw unit fractions in capital letters. I could not agree with that more. It's so important in 3rd grade to get that right because it does keep showing up over and over again. And I think somebody said 5th grade's intense. It definitely does build to be a bit more intense. So what we would like to do now, since we've thought about in this process, we've done the math, we've looked at the coherence map and the learning progression, and now we want to look at what does this math look like. So we know in words what the math concept looks like as it builds across the progression, but what does that math concept look like in the mathematics as it goes along the progression? So we did the 4th grade task, which is in the middle here. And we're going to take a couple minutes just to do the 3rd grade task and the 5th grade task. All of these are linked along the same progression in the coherence map. So if you go to the coherence map and you looked up equivalence in 4th grade fractions and looked back to 3rd grade, this task would show, and going the other direction, that task would show. So the coherence map is really nice of pulling up the math concept in terms of words, but also showing you the math. So I'm going to take that 4th grade one out so we can see all 3, or see the 2 left. And I'm just going to give you a couple minutes you can pick one or the other, or if you have time, do both. And just think about how students might solve these and how that math connects to that 4th grade task that we just did at the beginning of this. And feel free to put your thoughts in the chat, any connections that you see. Yes, I see a lot of connections of the denominator there, and that equivalence factors definitely comes into play. Yes, and we can see in the 3rd grade task, they're asking them to draw a picture and a number line, which then goes into the picture in 4th grade.
It's interesting because part B in the 5th grade task also asks them to draw a picture that shows their solution. So even though thinking about connecting the more abstract algebraic way of solving it, but still having kids, in some ways connect to a picture, being able to maybe justify solutions based on a picture.
Yeah. Yes, and I see a lot of connections to the progressions clips also. And I do like how, I agree, Heather, how the grade 5 asks for a picture. I think it's a nice piece in there, building on what students know. And I think that's a really important piece of looking at this progression and looking at what students have done prior to the grade level that you teach, or the grade level of the task that you give, to know what you're building on, and I think that's really helpful. Otherwise, sometimes it can be a disconnected set of ideas if they feel like they're just learning something new each year, whereas if we're building on what they know, we can definitely take what was done in 3rd grade and help the student build on that in 4th grade, and then help them build on that in 5th grade. So it forms a really coherent sequence of learning and understandings for students. So it's important that we do the work as teachers to understand that as well. Just a little, the great thing about using the illustrative mathematics tasks is that they have nice commentary along with the solutions. So they give you the purpose of the task. Some of them are assessment tasks. Some of them are tagged as an instructional task. So it does give you a little bit of guidance around when's a good time to use this, what you could learn about student thinking. So it is a great place to be able to understand the purpose of the task and the solutions, because sometimes we could do a task and all interpret it a bit differently. So it's nice to know the intention behind the writing of the task and the solutions that could be expected to go along with it based on the standards. And it's really great for teacher learning. We use these a lot in PLCs just to talk about the math concepts in a common language. So I want to reflect on the progression of the task. And so what I want to think about now is when we look at the coherence map and we look at the learning progressions and we look at the mathematics across the tasks, what type of connections do you think teachers might see? So if you were sitting in a PLC, what type of connections do you think they would see between all of the pieces, between the coherence, doing the math, and reading the progression documents? What type of connections do you think people would see? And we can use the chat just to share some of your thoughts around that. I know when we did this presentation at the Core Advocate convening, Jenny and I think it was an aha for a lot of people in the room in terms of doing the math and just brainstorming what we thought students were building on and building toward, and then how much we refined our thinking after we read the progression document and the coherence map. It's just nice to think about it absent all of the reading and then do the reading and come back to it. It was really nice, and I think somebody put in there deep, important math. And I think that we do learn a lot. We learn a lot going through this progression of teacher learning, specialized content knowledge. And I see somebody putting, understanding how one standard builds upon another is so important. I always say trying to plan a lesson for what students don't know is just like putting Band-Aids on things, where if you're building based on what students do know, it really helps the student be more successful in mathematics. The last thing that is in the resource widget is a planning sheet that Jenny and I made for the session that we did. And we think it's a general structure. We would definitely love to hear if anybody uses it or takes it and adapts it. But it just goes through the exact process that we just did. So we go through and say, do the math, and then how might students demonstrate understanding of this task. And we ask that people, just like we want our students to have individual think time, when you're doing this with a group of colleagues, it's nice just to give everybody time to think about the math by themselves first, because sometimes it's really easy to get sucked into what everybody else is saying without having time to observe it on your own. So do encourage you that if you are doing that math with colleagues, everybody has just some independent think time to think about the mathematics. And then it's just the three: what do you think it's addressing, what do you think it's building on, and what do you think it's building toward? And this is one of those spaces that we encourage people just to fill it, like don't fill up the whole entire box because we want to keep refining that. And so we like to write some things in there, but leave space, because when you get done the process and reading the coherence map and the progression documents and doing the tasks along the progression, it's really nice to come back and add your new understandings to what you previously thought in that work. So that's something that we encourage you to do as well. If you are a coach, I remember seeing in the opening poll that we had some coaches, district math people here. We really do strongly suggest you pull from that coherence map, because they link right to the illustrative mathematics tasks. So if you are doing a very particular, a specific chunk of a progression, you really want to pull those tasks right from there, because they're guaranteed to be aligned to the standard. Another thing we recommend is when you pull the progression documents, they are fairly dense. So when Jenny and I did this session before, we made sure to take that equivalence piece, which is much more digestible than having people try to digest all of the third grade fraction progression, because it covers a lot of areas. So we do really recommend that you take a particular area and you zoom in a bit, and it gives people space and time to not feel overwhelmed and really think about a really specific mathematical concept. So when you're pulling things to use with groups of teachers, or if you're pulling them just to play around and do some mathematics for your own personal learning, you just want to make sure that it's focused and digestible in a manageable amount of time. So I think that is also linked in that resource doc. And I think we talked about the connections between the tasks, the progression, and the grade level tasks a bit. But if you have any more thoughts about those, you can put those right in the chat box. And I think with that, I am turning it back over to Jenny.
Great, thank you, Kristen. That was amazing to have you take us through that process and let us practice a little bit in terms of helping us all build our mathematical content knowledge. So we're going to dig in a little deeper to how we can build math content knowledge in any topic, although it seemed like lots of you were enjoying talking about fractions and equivalence. But we know that not everybody teaches in grades 3 through 5, and so we want to talk about how can we do this with any topic. So we're going to start again with a poll, and you can put a check mark next to any of them that you think are relevant. But what topic would you be most interested in diving into to build your own math content knowledge, or maybe work with the teachers that you work with in order to build their math content knowledge? So go ahead and put a check mark next to any of them that resonate with you. Great. These were some of them that we saw pop up in the group chat in the beginning of the webinar tonight, but quite a few people said place value, which isn't a surprise to me, knowing that we have a lot of K-5 teachers on the webinar tonight. I also had seen functions quite a bit in the original chat that you all did, and then expressions and equations. And I love the number of people that said modeling, because that is an important conceptual category for high school. And so thinking about that also as a topic that might be important to dig more deeply into. So that's great. Just wanted to point out that there's guidance out there about what topics we should spend time with. We know that teachers and educators' time is precious and limited, and so we want to make sure that if we are spending time in a PLC or even on our own or in a group professional learning setting, that we are maximizing that time and spending time on topics that are the most important. So this page is on the back of our Focus by Grade Level documents, and it shows that important subset of major work in grades K-8 that is the progression that leads toward algebra. And so any of these topics that are listed on that document would be important. And I did put a link in the resources widget to the Focus by Grade Level documents. And then those Focus by Grade Level documents give also specific guidance around the major clusters of each grade level in K-8 that would be important to dig deeply into and to spend time with. And for high school teachers, we have our widely applicable prerequisites document that I also put a link to in the widget, or in the resources widget. And this outlines those topics in high school and even some topics in grades 6 through 8 that are most applicable to post-secondary education. And so again, this would be good guidance for high school teachers around what are those topics that would be worth time spending digging deeply into math content knowledge. And this just sort of summarizes the process that Kristen took you through. And I want to just point out two things. One is Kristen wrote a blog post on Illustrative Mathematics blog about this process. And so the link to that blog post is in the resources widget, so I would encourage you to check that out and share that blog post with your colleagues and talk about how you could use this process in your own settings. What's interesting is I noticed when you all were talking, especially and putting comments in the group chat, especially around the 3rd grade and 5th grade tasks, that it's easy for educators to slip into what students are doing and how students would approach this and even to some degree how you would teach it. And for some reason, this happens every time I've tried this process with educators. It's really hard to stay in the space of just thinking about the mathematics ourselves and not moving into like, how would I teach this, or how would my students approach it, or what are strategies I would use. And so I think that it's hard for us because that is so much always our frame of mind is, how am I going to do this with students? What might my students be thinking? And we're so centered and focused on our students. So I think it's important for educators to acknowledge that sometimes it's okay to just back away from that space and think about how do we learn for ourselves. And so this process really is about teacher learning and educator learning around math content. And if we can get really deep into really understanding the mathematics ourselves, why does it work when we shift some of those colored squares up, that we're able to see that this is not only 3/12, but it's also 1/4, and really like dig deeply into the mathematics and the concepts behind it, then that is doing our students a favor. It's going to help us be better educators when we're educating them around those topics. So this process is really for teacher learning. And I'll just reiterate what Kristen said, the portion about reading the progression documents. We found it really successful going through this process when we have taken just a small slice of the progression document that is really highly aligned to the specific math topic that we're trying to dig deeply into. A lot of math folks enjoy the progression documents because we love math, but they can be really dense. And so just being able to narrow the scope, like this little progression that we looked at was just around, wasn't everything about fractions in 3-5, it was just about equivalent fractions. And so taking a really small slice and thinking about how we can get deep with a small slice of mathematics is important. Even if you think about, the big topic of functions, what about functions might you dig deeply into? Because it's hard to get deep into everything about functions, and so picking just a small slice, and that's where using the Coherence Map helps a little bit with that.
I just want to add on there, Jenny. I think something that is important too, if sometimes PLCs are only a short amount of time, so it is trying to make the most of your time together. What we also recommend doing is when you do the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade task, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to do each task. It could be where one person or group does the 3rd, one does the 4th, and one does the 5th, and they do more of a share of the task with the rest of the group so that it's not everybody doing all the tasks. So there are ways to make this be a longer process if you have the time, but you can do some of that splitting up the work and sharing what is happening across all 3. I think it would be one way that could be manageable for people who are working within a constrained amount of time in a PLC too.
Great, thank you, Kristen, and really appropriate also for a vertical PLC. I know sometimes it's hard to find something relevant for a PLC that includes teachers from a variety of grade levels, and so this is really something that could be done with a vertical PLC as well. So we wanted you to think about, before we have just a little bit of time left, how might you use this process? So it certainly could be done independently. If a teacher wants to just dig in on their own, they could start with identifying a topic and thinking about going into the Coherence Map to identify a strand of standards that they would use, but also maybe in a small group PLC or a department meeting, or maybe a larger, like a larger department type meeting, or even this could be a process that's led in a more large group professional learning experience like Kristen and I did. And so we want you to think about how might you use this process, and maybe you would use it in more than one way. So a final poll for the evening is, how do you see yourself using this process? So take a minute to select one of the items. I'll look at the answers in just a minute, but I love that some of you are also being more specific in the group chat about ways that you might use this process. So it looks like many people are thinking about using it for themselves, which is great. And lots of people also thinking about leading it for others in a professional learning structure. And some people are thinking about in a PLC either for themselves or leading it. Great. So we have just a little bit of time. I'm going to pass the webinar back to, do you have something else, Kristen, to say? Oh, sorry, I thought I heard you.
That was Nicole. No, I think that was
Great.
Nicole. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I'm going to pass it back to Nicole to finish this off.
Thank you so much, Jenny and Kristen. That was a wonderful webinar. If you would like to know more about our network, if you want to join our network, please go to achievethecore.com/CA signup. The benefits of joining are that you will get updates on any free resources we create, any upcoming webinars, any more professional learning. You'll get to join a great group of educators around the country, connect with your state network, and also provide feedback for our new tools and resources. And here are some ways that you can join us. You can participate. You can, like I said, sign up on achievethecore.org/CA signup. Follow us on Twitter. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Pinterest. If you have a QR code scanner, you can scan that code on the bottom of your screen, and it will take you right to the Core Advocate survey to sign up for our network. And join us again next month. We will be doing high school mathematics, the reveal of the extended Coherence Map, long-awaited high school Coherence Map. We took your feedback, we heard from you, and we created one. That one will be led by Barbara Besky on March 6th at 7 p.m. And you can register on 24. If you get our newsletter, you'll also see the link in a few days. And I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to talk through our how to build more content knowledge.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And so many of you were excited about the Coherence Map on this webinar, so I hope you'll be excited about joining. Even if you don't teach high school, it's going to be a really informative webinar. So also, if you want to dig even deeper into math content knowledge and have an opportunity to dig into a topic, maybe it's you want to go even deeper into fractions at 3rd through 5th grade, or maybe you want to go into a topic at another grade band. We're going to be creating a virtual mini course on building mathematical content knowledge that's going to launch in the late spring, or maybe early summer, I guess is what the slide says, depending on where you teach. So for some people it might be early summer, and for some people it might be late spring. But it's participants who attend the virtual mini course will get certificates of completion with number of hours for the course included. We're still building out the course, so all the details about how many hours and how long the course will be and when we'll meet are going to be coming. But we encourage you to check out our social media places or the Core Advocate newsletter for more details as they become available closer to the launch of that course. So if you follow Achieve the Core on Twitter or on Facebook, we'll also be announcing it up on our main webpage on Achieve the Core. So check it out maybe March, April-ish for more details about that.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you to all of you for joining us. If you would like to see this webinar, share it with your colleagues. It will be available on demand on 24 in a few hours, and if not, you can visit our website at achievethecore.org, and it should be available for you to view tomorrow. Thanks again, and we hope that you join us next month. Have a good night.